You know how some franchises give fans original hit after original hit? Such is the case of the Cloverfield franchise, which did 3 standout films that, critics and audience scores be damned, was in my opinion all built on the same universe without offering the same old tired story. Something that Alien Romulus and other franchise furtherers couldn't help but do. Well, Smile 2 finds itself stuck in the latter category. Another film that garners an easy audience by existing in an established world without offering those fans anything worth seeing. Scathing intro aside, I do think that Smile 2 has cinematic elements worth seeing. The acting is superb, camera work is excellent, and the horror is mint. But before we can get into the review, let me explain the footage on screen. I hate the talking head format and can't just show you clips of the movie due to copyright issues. So, please enjoy some spooky gameplay so that at least you have something to look at, assuming you're not just listening to it. Okay, now, movie time. Starting off, the acting and writing is easily one of the strongest elements of this film. Naomi Scott did a terrific job of portraying Sky Riley, the protagonist who was haunted by both current and past trauma, while also being desensitized to her own emotions and well-being from the constant need to perform as an artist. Over the course of the film, she goes from a recovering narcissist who you question might be deserving of the harrowing events of the film, to a tortured survivor who, based on those around her, makes you question how she didn't end up as an even worse person. Naomi's character is easily one of the best depictions I have ever seen of a superstar, and this is hammered home by the predatory side characters that surround her. It's not some secret that most famous people are usually raised and/or accompanied by scumbags, and Sky Riley's entourage is no different. Rosemary DeWitt plays her mother, and Miles Gutierrez Riley stars as her assistant. Just like Sky herself, they are phenomenal at portraying both the fame-obsessed parent figure and the timid assistant who masks with politeness to avoid crumbling from the constant bickering and selfishness that surrounds him. As great as these actors are, the writing really allows them to shine. Again, I've never seen such a convincing set of careless people, and it makes you wonder whether this could have been an episode of Succession. It really can't be understated, especially since Smile is a franchise all about self-loathing and grief, how good the actors and writers are at capturing that element. But there's other things to cover, such as the excellent visual displays the movie serves up. While there is the mainstay gore that befits a horror movie, there is so much more to the horror than just blood and viscera. The movie uses Sky's choreographed dances as a medium to convey something beyond human. Her routine has her fellow dancers twirling her through the air, their hands grasping at her body as she is surrounded by arms and legs. There's something incredibly disturbing about seeing so many appendages come together to form a thing that our eyes can't quite put together as a whole being. And let's just say that this dance routine isn't forgotten about later on. Point being that I didn't even feel a chill when blood was pouring and meat was flying, but I most certainly felt a shudder when the film utilized figures in the dark and elements of body horror. Speaking of darkness, the lighting and cinematography was another big hit. The film plays on the childish human fear of large rooms with only a few light sources, and it does it phenomenally. Sky's apartment is filled with massive empty space, and as she and the camera peers out into the unlit areas of her room, you are forced as well to gaze and wonder what might be lurking there. Oftentimes in the movie, that question is answered very quickly. But there is one standout scene that reminds me of analog horror, as a man films and wanders through his house. All you can hear is the shuddering breaths he emits as he passes by the light of his television while he AFKs in COD and creeps into his bedroom where he zooms into the darkness. This to me is peak terror, as not only is the movie using familiar sights such as a blackened living room with a familiar game on the TV screen, but it brings the fear home. I'm not scared of a demon throwing shit across my house or an alien impregnating me, but I am absolutely terrified of that deafening silence that accompanies sitting in a house all by yourself, wondering if someone else is inside with you. But for everything it does well, there's definitely one major downside, that being the plot and pacing. This will be the spoiler-free version, so if things sound vague or not well constructed, well, there's not much I can do about that. To get into it, this movie is a reboot of the franchise, a franchise that started 2 years ago. To call this a sequel feels so odd, as it assumes you've never seen the first one. The movie goes on to re-explain how the monster works, and it spends so much of the first half playing into the "what is happening to me" element. It feels far weaker the second time around because we as the audience already have these answers. What made Smile 1 so great was that you genuinely didn't know if this was a demon, a nervous breakdown, or something else. We aren't even sure how the chain works or how long it's been happening for. It isn't until the final moments of the first film that the monster reveals itself, and what a reveal that is. The baffling part is that Smile 2 takes that exact formula and smashes Control-C, Control-V. It makes sense lore-wise that Sky Riley doesn't know what is happening and needs the breakdown, but you have to consider your audience. So if you're fine rewatching the same movie you saw 2 years ago, then you will enjoy this one. And if you want more information on what makes the plot so weak, then keep watching, but spoilers inbound. So, without further ado, what is the plot of Smile 2? The movie opens with police officer Joel from the last movie, who breaks into a minority's house while holding him at gunpoint. Inside is the man's brother, who Joel forces to watch as he carves his sibling up. I should mention that these two brothers are mobsters and drug dealers, which is why Joel wants to pass the monster onto one of them, as they are bad people. However, they are also mobsters and drug dealers. So of course, the second Joel starts carving the guy up like a pumpkin, the other brother starts shooting. Joel ducks out of the way while returning fire, accidentally striking the guy in the chest and killing him. Come to find out, there was an innocent junkie who witnessed the whole ordeal, and Joel apologizes as he leaves, realizing he passed the monster onto him. Joel is killed as he flees the house from an entourage of other gang members, and the story kicks off. Sky Riley is a recovering drug addict who is trying to focus on doing the right thing after being involved in a horrific car accident that killed her boyfriend. Because of the accident, she has a scar on her stomach and back, both of which she is ashamed of. Also, those scars hurt like a bitch, and she's in need of something stronger than Tylenol. So, she hits up her drug dealer, and upon entering his apartment, we realize he was the buyer at the dealer's house. He greets Sky by unsheathing his glorious Nippon steel and holding it to her throat. That sounds like normal behavior, but then he starts rambling about the scary shit he's seen and disappears into his room to get Sky her Vicodin. Sky looks at the pile of coke on his table and is tempted to relapse, but not before realizing her dealer still hasn't come back. She enters his room as he bursts out screaming before seeing something as he wails in terror. We know that his time is up, but Sky briefly thinks he's ODing until he decides to lift some free weights into his face. Now, the monster has been passed on to her, but rather than call 911 for her pizza-faced, with extra marinara dealer, she instead realizes that people would think she was trying to get high and flees the scene. She tries to go back to a normal life of getting shoved into new performances, but she can't stop seeing the dead body of the dealer everywhere she looks. Eventually, she has to do a meet and greet in which the movie does a great fake out by having a crazed fan feel like a hallucinated monster person, but in reality just be a genuine freak. Then of course she sees the first Smiler, which is a little girl who doesn't say a word to her. Her hallucinations continue to get worse to the point she calls her old-time pal Gemma over, who she burned bridges with after cussing her out via text and treating her like a piece of shit. Gemma agrees to come over and listens as Sky breaks down, admitting to have watched the dealer kill himself. Gemma agrees with her to tell no one, and spends the night to give her peace of mind. During that night, Sky receives text from an unknown number, threatening her that they know she was at the scene of the suicide. Sky then is forced to host a charity event for up-and-coming young artists, despite her protesting that she is losing her mind. Her mother coerces her by reminding her that her benefactor Darius pays the bills, and she can't say no. On stage, the teleprompter fails to continue scrolling, and Sky is forced to improvise by making jokes about her substance abuse, which land as well as the ones I'm trying to include in this script. Sky then sees her deceased boyfriend approaching her, and to defend herself, she launches an old grandma off the stage as she crashes through a table. Sky continues to lose her mind in her apartment, but finds that the unknown number has sent her the final video of the late Dex-leveling drug dealer. The dealer records random dark corners of his home before asking the viewers if they also see the smiling person in the room with him. Realizing that she isn't alone, Sky agrees to meet up with the unknown number, who turns out to be a brother of one of the victims. He tells her everything the audience already knows, but says he found a way to kill the monster by having Sky die alone with no one to watch. Again, we already know this, but he adds the twist that as he is a trained ER nurse, he can stop her heart and resuscitate her, which will somehow force the monster out of her, killing it and keeping her alive. Of course, Sky believes he sounds batshit crazy and flees after getting recognized by a random person. Back at her apartment, Sky is attacked by a stack of her backup dancers, which mighty morph into a giant centipede-like flesh creature as they descend onto her, dragging her into darkness. In a flashback, we come to find that Sky's big guilt moment, much like Rose Cotter from the first movie, is due to her being responsible for her loved one's death. In a coked-out argument, Sky grabs the wheel of the car, sending her and her boyfriend plummeting to his death. To speed through the rest of this, Sky wakes up in a mental hospital, gets in a fight with her mother over wanting to stop the tour, and then hallucinates her mother killing herself. Sky then wakes up with a glass shard in her hand and finds out she killed her own mother. She sprints out of the hospital, grabbing a guard's gun and shooting wildly as she hijacks a car that Gemma just happened to use. Gemma watches as Skye carjacks her driver and decides to jump in with her. Skye contacts the ER nurse and agrees to his plan, and then in an actual shocking twist, we find out that Gemma was a hallucination all along, as the real Gemma calls Skye on the phone, which is basically the therapist scene from the first movie. Skye wakes up in front of the ER nurse's evil-ass rape building, which is actually an abandoned Pizza Hut that he bought as it has a freezer. He explains that she has to be cold so she doesn't get necrosis, and then leaves her in the freezer. The final showdown then unfolds between Skye and her mind monster, which is the car wreck version of herself, and this is where the movie really drops the ball. If you've seen the first one, then the ending is beat for beat the exact same thing, with the same fake-out victory. Skye takes her own life, only to find out she is waking up on stage at her concert in front of thousands. Her mother is alive and well in the crowd, and Skye loses to the monster and then somehow off-screen smashes her head in with a microphone, passing the monster onto everyone in the audience. So, now that you know the plot, you can understand why I don't like the film. It is the exact same movie. I can say, the plot is about a woman who is dealing with trauma from her past because she caused someone to die and then becomes infected with a nightmare monster who brings her closer to the brink of suicide. She has constant hallucinations, begins to go crazy, nearly kills someone, and with a twist ending, loses to the monster after seemingly winning. And you will not know which movie I'm talking about. We as the audience already know the victims hallucinate. We already know they are on the speedway to death. We already know how the monster works. This is the kind of movie that would have come out 10 or more years after Smile 1 did, and then act as a soft reboot, where you never had to watch the original. I, as the viewer, want something new, something fresh. I want to know about how the monster started. Who was the first victim? What happens if someone does kill themselves alone? These are the obvious questions the first movie prompts, and the sequel explores none of them. The most interesting part of the entire film takes place in the final scene, and that narrative won't be expanded on until a potential third film. That premise is a far, far more compelling sequel narrative than the one we got. The plot of Smile 2 could have been a 10-minute intro of Skye's inevitable death, and then a wildly different movie in the spirit of The Happening, with a suicidal epidemic that was fueling a monster. But rather than leaning into that and potentially bombing like The Happening, Smile 2 plays it so safe that it doesn't even bother creating a new story. And there you have it. In less vitriolic words, Smile 2 is another formulaic horror movie, with different scares than the one before it. If you go into it expecting more of what made Smile scary, then you'll enjoy it. But if you want something actually different, then I would recommend It Follows, or The Taking of Deborah Logan. Otherwise, feel free to share your thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider subscribing to get notified of new videos and to help me reach more people. And if you do so, then you have my sincerest, deepest thanks.